Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jara Vallabha Girivaradari. Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Kala Chanji Radha Kala Chanji Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Good morning, devotees. My name is Manjari Gopika Devi Dasi, and today we will be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, verses 18 through 28, focusing on verse 27. Before we begin, I ask for your blessings, that I may speak something pleasing to my spiritual master, to Srila Prabhupada, and to all the devotees. Let us begin by chanting together the invocation prayer. Narayanam namaskritta naram chaiva narottamam devim sarvasvatim vyasyam tatto jayam udirayet. Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so again, today we'll be reading from Canto 4, Chapter 4, verses 18 through 28, focusing on verse 27. So we can all take turns reading. Each person, why don't you read 2, since we have 10 verses to get to. Okay, so text 18.
Therefore I shall no longer bear this unworthy body which has been received from you, who has blasphemed Lord Shiva. If someone has taken food which is poisonous, the best treatment is to vomit. It is better to execute one's own occupational duty than to criticize others. Elevated transcendentalists may sometimes forego the rules and regulations of the Vedas, since they do not need to follow them, just as the demigods travel in space, whereas ordinary men travel on the surface of the earth.
In the Vedas, there are directions for 2 kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment, and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these 2 kinds of activities, there are 2 kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see 2 kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. My dear Father, the opulence we possess is impossible for either you or your flatterers to imagine. For persons who engage in fruitive activities by performing great sacrifices are concerned with satisfying their bodily necessities by eating foodstuff offered as sacrifice. We can exhibit our opulences simply by desiring to do so. And this can be achieved only by great personalities who are renounced self-realized souls.
You are an offender at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva, and unfortunately I have a body produced from yours. I am very much ashamed of our bodily relationship, and I condemn myself because my body is contaminated by a relationship with a person who is an offender at the lotus feet of the greatest personality. Because of our family relationship, when Lord Shiva addresses me as Dakshayini, I at once become morose, and my jolliness and my smile at once disappear. I feel very much sorry that my body, which is just like a bag, has been produced by you. I shall therefore give it up.
Maitreya the sage told Vidura, O annihilator of enemies, while thus speaking to her father in the arena of sacrifice, Sati sat down on the ground and faced north. Dressed in saffron garments, she sacrificed herself with water and closed her eyes to absorb herself in the process of mystic yoga. First of all, she sat in the required sitting posture, and then she carried the life air upwards and placed it in the position of equilibrium near the navel. Then she raised her life air mixed with intelligence to the heart, and then gradually towards the pulmonary passage, and from there to between her eyebrows.
Thus, in order to give up her body, which had been so respectfully and affectionately seated on the lap of Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by great sages and saints, Sati, due to anger towards her father, began to meditate on the fiery air within the body. Sati concentrated all her meditation on the holy lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements.
You can, do you want to read Raseshri? The last verse? The one that says text 28.
When Sati annihilated her body in anger, there was a tumultuous war all over the universe. Why had Sati, the wife of the most respectable demigod Lord Shiva, quit her body in such a manner?
Jai, thank you. Ending on a cliffhanger there. So now we'll return to verse 27, our focus verse for today. in the interest of time, as we did start a few minutes late, I'm trying to keep us on schedule. For the Sanskrit, I'll chant, you repeat, and then we'll do it all together one time. Tatas vabartus charanam bujasavam. Tatas vabartus charanam bujasavam. Jagat guros chintayati nyaparam. Jagat guros chintayati nyaparam. Dadarsha deho hatakama sasati. Sadhya prajajvala samadhi jagnina. Beautiful. Let's do it all together one time. Tatas vabartus charanam bujasavam. Jagat gurus chintayati nachaparam. Dadarsha deho hatakama sasati. Sadhya prajajvala samadhi jagnina. Let's do the word-for-word translation all together. Tata, there, Svabartu, of her husband, Charan Ambujasavam, on the nectar of the lotus feet, Jagat Guru, of the supreme spiritual master of the universe, Chintayati, meditating, Na, not, Cha, and, Aparam, not other than her husband, Dadarsha, saw, Deha, her body, Hata Kamasaha, taints of sin being destroyed, Sati, Sadhya, soon, Prajajvala, burned, Samadhi ja Agnina, by fire produced by meditation. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sati concentrated all her meditation on the holy lotus feet of her husband Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Sati at once thought of the lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who was one of the three great personalities of Godhead in charge of the management of the material world. And simply by meditating on his lotus feet, she derived such great pleasure that she forgot everything in relationship with her body. This pleasure was certainly material, because she gave up her body for another body that was also material. But by this example, we can appreciate the devotee's pleasure in concentrating his mind and attention on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, or Krishna. There is such transcendental bliss in simply meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord that one can forget everything but the Lord's transcendental form. This is the perfection of yogic samadhi, or ecstasy. In this verse, it is stated that by such meditation, she became free from all contamination. What was that contamination? The contamination was her concept of the body derived from daksha, but she forgot that bodily relationship in trance. The purport is that when one becomes free from all bodily relationships within this material world and simply places himself in the position of an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that all the contamination of his material attachment has been burned by the blazing fires of transcendental ecstasy. It is not necessary for one to manifest a blazing fire externally, for if one forgets all his bodily relationships within this material world and becomes situated in his spiritual identity, it is said that one has been freed from all material contamination by the blazing fire of yogic samadhi, or ecstasy. That is the topmost perfection of yoga. If one keeps his bodily relationships within this material world and poses himself as a great yogi, he is not a bona fide yogi. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 4, verse 15, it is stated, Yat Kirtanam Yat Smaranam. Simply by chanting the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, simply by remembering the lotus feet of Krishna, simply by offering prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is immediately freed from material contamination. The material bodily concept by the blazing fire of ecstasy. This effect takes place immediately, without a second's delay. According to Sri Jiva Goswami, that sati quit her body means that she gave up within her heart her relationship with Daksha. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also comments that since Sati is the superintendent deity of the external potency, when she quit her body, she did not get a spiritual body, but simply transferred from the body she had received from Daksha. Other commentators also say that she immediately transferred herself into the womb of Manaka, her future mother. She gave up the body she had received from Daksha and immediately transferred herself to another, better body, but this does not mean that she got a spiritual body. So the first and second cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam represent the lotus feet of the Lord. The third and fourth cantos represent his thighs. So we're moving upward. In this canto, the fourth canto, personalities like Lord Shiva, Suniti, Dhruva, Narada, Prita, and the Prajetas all show extraordinary examples of devotional service. Similarly, in this canto, we also learn about unfavorable attitudes toward devotional service from the mistakes of characters like Daksha, Surichi, the stepmother of Dhruva Maharaj, and King Vena. This chapter is entitled Sati Quits Her Body. This chapter begins, we heard earlier this week, with Sati leaving her husband, Lord Shiva's home, against his advice, and she goes to her father, Daksha's house. Daksha was not happy to see her, and he gave her a cold reception. Then he blasphemed her husband, Lord Shiva. She cannot tolerate the blasphemy of her husband, who is also the greatest of the Vaishnavas. So she starts condemning her body that is related to her father, and she decides to quit her body altogether. Prabhupada mentions the following points in the purport. In the translation, it mentions that Lord Shiva is the spiritual master of the world. As we know, there are 4 authorized sampradayas. One founded by Lord Brahma, one by Mother Lakshmi, the 4 Kumaras, and Lord Shiva. In the purport, Lord Shiva is also described as one of the 3 great personalities of Godhead in charge of the management of the material world. What we can learn from this episode is how the blaspheming of Vaishnavas leads to ultimate destruction, followed by all inauspiciousness. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is famously mentioned that blaspheming a devotee is a mad elephant offense. In the West, when we think of elephants, maybe we think of them in a zoo, or maybe like you have to, if you're in Africa, you get on a jeep and you go way out, to see elephants. But in India, in many places, elephants, they live in the outskirts in the forest. I actually saw one in Rishikesh. It's another story. And they can come into your village. And when an elephant is, crazy or angry, it will literally destroy the village in a matter of minutes. And there's nothing you can do. How can you stop this elephant from uprooting things and knocking over homes and trampling your garden and all of that? Within seconds, everything is finished. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's mentioned that is Vaishnava Aparad. So first, getting the seed of devotional service is so rare. In Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 151, there's the famous verse, Brahmanda Brahmite Konna Bhagyavan Jiva, Guru Krishna Prasare Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. According to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to the upper planetary system, some are going down into the lower planetary system. Out of many millions of the wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets the opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed, just the seed of the creeper of devotional service. The creeper is like a vine. So then by hearing and chanting, the creeper, it starts to grow. And just like an expert gardener that protects and nourishes growing plants, we must protect this creeper of devotional service so that it flourishes and it grows and it gets stronger until finally it reaches the lotus feet of Sri Radha Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. We must protect it from being trampled by the mad elephant. The scriptures state that it is not just an offense to speak blasphemy of a devotee. It is also an equally dangerous offense to hear blasphemy of a devotee. Blasphemy of a Vaishnava is such a heavy sin that the following instructions are explained in the scriptures of how to treat the blasphemer of a Vaishnava. 1, block one's ears and leave the place if one is unable to punish him. 2, cut his tongue and kill him, and then give up one's own life as an atonement for hearing that criticism. By killing the blasphemer, one destroys one's unlimited pain in hell, so such killing is not a sin. A kshatriya should cut out the offender's tongue and kill him. Vaishyas and Shudras are not qualified to punish, so they should commit suicide. Brahmanas, it's not proper for them to give up their life, so they should cover their ears, remember Vishnu, and go away. Because Daksha, who blasphemed the master of religion, Lord Shiva, happened to be the father of Sati, she decided not to kill him, but to instead give up her own life. The scriptures go to such an extreme, killing the blasphemer, killing oneself. It's a serious business. You know, Lord Chaitanya didn't talk much about the 4 regulative principles. He mostly discussed 2 things. 1, always chant the holy name. 2, never criticize anyone, not just devotees. That means that if you are chanting Hare Krishna and criticizing, that's creating holes in your bhakti. And Lord Chaitanya said that anyone who chants and doesn't criticize, they will get Krishna Prem. So we have a do and a don't. Do chant Hare Krishna, don't criticize anyone. One of the most famous Shastric examples of Vaishnava aparad is the story of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvas Muni, which is explained in the 9th canto, 4th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ambarish Maharaj was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. He was known for his unwavering faith and devotion. He was a righteous king who ruled his kingdom with compassion, adherence to Dharma, and detachment. He wasn't caught up in all the trappings of his gorgeous palace and his wealth. He was very much detached and in service to Lord Vishnu. So Ambarish Maharaj decided to observe a fast for 1 whole year. Durvas Muni was a brahmana. He was also a great mystic yogi, and he was very envious of Ambarish Maharaj. Durvas Muni felt, here's a person who's a grihasta and a kshatriya. He's not even a brahmana. He doesn't even practice anything. He's always engaged in his royal activities. And this man is so famous as a great person, a great devotee. It's not right. I'll show him. So he wanted to pick some quarrel with Ambarish Maharaj. And on Dvadasi, the fast-breaking day, Durvas Muni went to Ambarish's palace with 60,000 disciples. And he said, Maharaj, please arrange for our prasadam. Of course, Ambarish was very happy to serve them, this brahmana, his disciples, and he made arrangements with his staff to prepare the feast. And Durvas Muni said, Maharaj, I will go and bathe in the river, and then when I come back, I will take prasad. So he went to the Ganges, the Yamuna, to bathe, and he purposefully stayed there for a long, long, long time. As per etiquette, Maharaj Ambarish could not eat before serving his guest. But the window of the fast-breaking time was dwindling. If he missed the fast-breaking time, then all the benefits he had accumulated over the past 12 months would be lost. But it would be an offense to eat before Durvas Muni was served. So Maharaj Ambarish, he consulted a couple of brahmanas, and he came up with a loophole. He would drink a couple drops of water, which would break his fast and still would not break etiquette. So he did that. And when Durvas Muni returned and learned of what had happened, he was furious. He felt disrespected. In his anger, he created a demon to punish Ambarish Maharaj. However, before the demon could harm the king, Lord Vishnu released his Sudarshan chakra, which destroyed the demon, and then pursued Durvas Muni, who ran across the universe trying to escape. Eventually, he realized he couldn't escape it, so he ran all the way to Brahmaloka and asked Lord Brahma for help. And Lord Brahma was not very helpful. He was like, when Lord Vishnu raises his eyebrows, we all take a step back. I really don't feel comfortable intervening here. So then Durvas Muni, he ran to Mount Kailash, and he asked Lord Shiva to please help him. And Lord Shiva said, we are all just subordinates to Lord Vishnu. You're coming to the demigods, but we work for him. There's nothing we can do for you. You have to go to Lord Vishnu and ask him for help. So Durvas Muni went to Vaikunta, and he asked Lord Vishnu for help. He apologized. He begged forgiveness. And Lord Vishnu speaks several beautiful verses. I've put the translations all together. He says, I am completely under the control of my devotees. Indeed, I am not at all independent. What to speak of my devotee? Even those who are devotees of my devotee are very dear to me. Since pure devotees give up their homes, wives, children, relatives, riches, and even their lives simply to serve me without any desire for material improvement in this life or in the next, how can I give up my devotees at any time? The pure devotee is always within the core of my heart, and I am always in the heart of the pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything else but me, and I do not know anything else but them. In the purport to that final verse, it's Canto 9, Chapter 4, verse 68. There's a sentence in there. The first time I read it, it really struck a chord with me, and I've always carried it in my heart. Prabhupada writes, the Lord's feelings are like those of a father who feels pain when his child is in pain. And that struck a chord with me because you all know my little girl. And there have been times and occasions where I feel, kids have kid drama stuff, right? And I hear about it, and I hear that she's been mistreated, and I hear that her heart is hurting. But kids get over things very quickly. Then she's friends again, and things are fine. And she can move on, she can move past it. But me, I'm like, you're playing with them after what they did to you? It's hard for me to move past it. It's as though the experience, the pain I feel in hearing about her mistreatment is greater than the pain she experiences in being mistreated. Krishna is a person. He has feelings. And when we criticize his devotees, we hurt his feelings. And I can only imagine that it's hard for him to get past that. It's hard for me to get past it when I hear about my daughter. Lord Vishnu then tells Durvas Muni, I can't forgive you. You need to go to Maharaj Ambarish. And the words he says are very interesting. He says, if you can satisfy him, then you will know peace. So he does. Durvas Muni goes back to Maharaj Ambarish. He begs for forgiveness, and thankfully for him, Maharaj Ambarish is a Vaishnav. And it took 1 whole year, Durvas Muni was trying to escape the Sudarshan chakra. So after 12 months, he returns to Maharaj Ambarish, and Maharaj Ambarish is standing there, waiting for him. He hasn't eaten still. He's been waiting for him to come so he could serve him prasadam. So does anyone know the first offense against the holy name? Yes. I looked directly at Justadumna because I knew he would know. It's true. The first offense against the holy name is blaspheming devotees. Criticizing the devotees of the Lord. Although Jagai and Madhai were so sinful, and they had so many bad qualities, they had one redeeming quality. They never blasphemed Vaishnavas. And that helped them in their success in being delivered by the mercy of Gauranga and Nityananda. Bhaktivinoda Thakur discusses the 10 offenses in detail in his text, the Harinam Chintamani. I'm just going to share some excerpts from it. He writes, when one has developed a taste for chanting the pure name, it is said that just by chanting one time, the holy name can destroy the influence of all past sins. And Prabhupada actually mentioned that in the purport today, that immediately things will be removed. Some remnants of those sins may still remain, but they will be completely vanquished by the influence of the holy name. Since those traces of sin will go quickly, that person is known as the most righteous person. Of course, if a materialist sees those traces of sins in a Vaishnav sadhu, he may consider that the sadhu is just like a materialistic sinner. If he should criticize the sadhu because the sadhu has a trace of sin coming from previous sinful activities, he is committing sadhu ninda, that's the first offense, and should be considered a rascal. Because of his fault of criticizing a Vaishnav, and by this nama parad, he falls directly unto the wrath of Krishna. So we should not criticize, because in due course of time, those sins will also be eradicated. It's concluded that one who surrendered unto Krishna and sings his name is considered a sadhu. And again, the heaviness. He says one who criticizes a Vaishnav goes to hell birth after birth. So if you think about it, we can only get on the path of liberation by the mercy of a Vaishnav. And I'll just share a couple more things, then we'll open it up for discussion. This is a very interesting point. In the Harinam Chintamani, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he talks about, he arranges he can like see in our minds as to categories of why we may criticize someone. Not that we should, but where these criticisms often land. And he says these four things. He says a Vaishnav, may usually be criticized on these four accounts. 1, his caste by birth. 2, previous sins or faults in this life. 3, unpremeditated accidental sin. And 4, traces of previous sinful activities. But he says, though all these may be present in a Vaishnav, they are insubstantial grounds for criticism of a Vaishnav. One who so blasphemes a Vaishnav will be punished by Yamaraj. Because a Vaishnav is spreading the glories of the holy name, the Lord does not tolerate criticism of a Vaishnav. And then he says something very interesting. He says, because association with non-devotees is bound to produce disrespect to devotees, the devotee is careful to avoid such association. Overcome with the influences of the material modes, if one commits the offense of blasphemy against a devotee, one should sincerely feel repentant and cry at the feet of the devotee for mercy and forgiveness. The devotee, who is by nature very merciful, will forgive the offender. Right? We saw that in this story with Durvas Muni and Maharaj Ambarish. Offenses begin in the mind, and they're expressed in words. So if one finds oneself thinking negative thoughts about other devotees, then one should be very careful. Mental offense can become a vocal offense, which is more serious. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says that with the same tongue that one uses to blaspheme a Vaishnav, one should glorify a Vaishnav. That is the way to counteract the offense of blasphemy. As a practice, we should praise and appreciate Vaishnavas, and that should protect us from getting to the place of thinking or speaking blasphemy. Okay, I will stop here. If anyone would like to share reflections or what have you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for such a well thought out, thorough class. I actually have 2 questions. So one, they might take a while though, I don't know. The one is, I guess the main one that I wanted to ask was, how can sometimes we need to discuss, like especially if we're in management or if we're in like positions of, like, we need to know these things, we need to discuss these things so that we can help other people. Sometimes we have to discuss different devotees and maybe they're not good association in this way, or they're, different things like that. How can we maybe do that in a way that's not causing us to make offenses? And what mood can we have, and how can we, just keep it?
Certainly, there are things we should do and things we should not do in order to advance in our spiritual practices. We should always consult our seniors in matters that are very sensitive. Vaishnavas that have experience, especially in management, and there are many courses in Vaishnava etiquette also. I am not in management, but usually when something gets to a point of criticism, it is always out of envy. So rather you're at a like Durvas Muni was thinking, I do all these things, I do all these yagyas, and I meditate for a day, and he fasted for 1 year, probably he fasted every year for a year or something. Right, how can he be elevated and I'm not? And that is usually where criticism comes from, is I am like this and you are like that. My Guru Maharaj says that in order to be happy in this world, we need to be able to do, what did he say, 3 things? Compassionate for those who are below our standard, compassion for those who are below our standard, and be really excited to help them. And we should be happy for those who are above us, and I'm paraphrasing here, and to cheer them on. And we should be content with improving ourselves. So those things should always be kept in mind. I don't think that's helpful at all, but that's my answer.
It's helpful, definitely. And I think, it's something that I can look more into and listen to more things about it. And then my second question, you were talking about, I guess it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur who said that yes. The way to counteract offenses is to glorify. Sometimes it gets to be like sinning on the strength of the holy name type of thing, where devotees might say something, they're joking around, they're like saying something about a devotee, and then they're like, oh, but they're so amazing though, da da da. Like they'll say something that's criticism, but then they're like, oh, but they're like such a good devotee, but it's like kind of to cover up the criticism. Mm-hmm. It feels like that in the moment. So how can we be aware of that, or like, can you talk about that?
We can't control what other people say. We can control what we listen to and what we engage with. And I think it's fine to say, oh, it makes me uncomfortable when we talk negative things. So I really, next time, let's start with what they're amazing at and leave out the other part. And that's just, we have to be looking at ourselves and how we speak. And if we're always glorifying people in our minds, then that's what will come out. And hopefully that will encourage the people around us to do the same thing. Yeah.
Eloquent answers, concise.
So I also had kind of 2 questions, but I guess my main question is that you brought up these things to do when you hear offenses.
Yeah.
And when we hear scriptural statements that are like very strong or heavy, I was talking with Abai yesterday, but there's kind of like 3 positions we can have. We can either say, this is applicable in every case, every single time, in every scenario. Or we can do the opposite, and we can say, oh, that was thousands of years ago, they were just saying that. And then we're supposed to find kind of like a middle ground of some kind. So I wouldn't want to say, oh, well, we're in America, we don't have a caste system here. So, and then also another part of my question is like, if we were to apply that, let's say I'm in the prasadam hall and someone makes like a little snippy comment like, oh, well, someone broke the microphone or something. Do I just like leave my body on the spot? I'm not sure how to apply this really. Yeah.
Well, even in Nectar of Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami says, if someone criticizes your guru, you have 3 choices. 1, kill him. 2, defeat him in argument. And if you can't do either of those 2 things, then walk away. So, that is the option that we always have. That's always available to us. We don't have to go to the killing of oneself and cutting out of the tongue. And I would say my husband always says, and he's right, that our scriptures are not textual, they're contextual. And what we should be getting from this, the reason I even said those things is because I think we we take it cheaply. Well, it's just words. I just said this thing, but the fact is that it's so heavily emphasized that it is so offensive that you've contaminated your physical body by hearing this. It's so sinful just to hear it that you better just leave this body. And that's really what I'm trying to emphasize. Not that we should be killing ourselves, but like, hey, let's actually perk up our ears and pay attention here. It's called the mad elephant offense for a reason. These were the punishments for a reason. It should be a wake-up call. I think I was reflecting that one of the reasons that we maybe criticize, or maybe it's just me, is we tend to think of Krishna and his devotees as separate. Right? How many of us would say, why are these Dallas devotees always talking about Kalachandji? I mean, he's not that great. Have you ever been to such and such temple? That Krishna, he has his fingers like this, and he stands like that, and his eyelashes. I mean, this one, he's like, oh, okay, but we would never say that. We would never, why? Because we know he's God. We know he's God. We would never, I mean, I'm kind of afraid of a boulder's going to fall on my face right now. It's so offensive to say that. But how often will we be like, why is so-and-so like always on the class schedule? Like they don't know, like I could give such a better class than that person. They don't really, or oh, there she is, leading kirtan again. I don't know why people really like her kirtans, But we do that. But Lord Vishnu says that my devotees, they're part of my heart. They're part of my heart. When you're criticizing them, you're criticizing me. When you're envious of them, you're actually envious of me.
Well, I had kind of another question and a half. Like my inner atheistic demon is saying, at what case is it like an offense, or is it just like, because we hear like they'll go to hell lifetime after lifetime, and and it's like very heavy. So I was wondering, like, even just like the slightest, smallest thing, really? Because like my inner demon is trying to baby proof. I don't know. I don't even know that, but I'm trying to like say like, oh, they only mean that if you like really like blast this devotee. But does it also count for just like even like the smallest little hint of their devotee is like, I don't know.
Well, I think we all get to a point where we're like, well, like when do I correct someone, and what about the rules and the regulations, and that is that, but you're thinking of, is it really an offense if I, in a snippy tone, tell people not to like stand in the door of the showroom? Like, is that where we're at? We just have to err on the side of caution, err on the side of caution. And you don't have an inner demon just to doom it, but all of us want to sort of hope that maybe there's hope for us in this lifetime and we won't be condemned to go to hell. All I can say is something for myself to practice too is to start seeing devotees as they're not the same as other people. Devotees are not ordinary people. And to start treating them with that kind of reverence. And we do get on each other's nerves. And I was thinking how, I grew up Catholic. Like, I only had to see people once a week. So there were no offenses to be made, because you can tolerate people when you only see them 1 out of 7 days. But in ISKCON, we're together every day, and we're hungry most of the time. And you gotta wait in line, and then you gotta serve with these people. And so we have to combat those material modes, I think, by hearing and chanting and starting to realize, but this is a devotee. Gokulananda Prabhu?
Little off topic. I was just thinking probably one more lesson that could be derived through this episode is wherever we sense there is a possibility of committing an offense, one should rather choose not to get into that situation. Like Mother Sati, she's such an elevated soul, I'm nobody to comment. But only if she had listened to her husband and not, chosen to attend that ceremony, this could have been avoided. But then it is also mentioned, everything is the divine arrangement of the Lord. I heard this from Sarvabhauma Prabhu, and which has been mentioned in Ramcharitmanas by the great saint Tulsidas, and also it is corroborated in Shiv Puran. The story goes when Mother Sati, she doubted her worshipable Lord, in whose name she was initiated by her husband, Lord Shiva. So when Lord Ram was wandering through the forest looking for Sita, shedding tears, crying out loudly, asking, inquiring from the trees, the mountains, so she doubted, is this the same Supreme Lord that my husband says is there in every single atom? And she doubted, and she asked Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva explained to her that he is the Supreme Lord, undoubtedly. But still she wasn't satisfied, and then she decided to test Lord Ram, just like Lord Brahma. He did that blunder testing Krishna, right? Brahma Vimohan Lila. So Lord Shiva kept warning her, please don't do that. And still she chose not to listen to him, and she assumed the form of Mother Sita, and she came to the place where Lord Ram was. And as soon as Lord Ram, it is explained, he saw her, he addressed her as the Bhavani, where is your husband? What are you doing without your husband? And immediately she was taken aback that, oh, he understood, that means he is my Supreme Lord. And she offered her prostrated obeisances, and when she got up, she saw Lord Ram in every single atom. That answered her doubt. But the story doesn't end here. When she went back to Lord Shiva, she saw Lord Shiva had already switched his seat. So usually, as per the Vedic tradition, the wife's seat is supposed to be on the left side of the husband. Now the seats had been switched because Lord Shiva had taken the left one. And she inquired, why so? He said, because you assumed the form of Mother Sita, who is my mother, I can never ever look up to you as my consort, my wife anymore. And that was the trigger point. It is said, that's how the whole episode was orchestrated, because she was lamenting that I cannot serve my husband anymore in the capacity of, a wife. So that's how the whole episode happened. So there are always these, stories behind why these episodes happen. That is just another part I wanted to share.
I was thinking about this, your point of enviness from criticizing. I was appreciating this point. I heard once that when you criticize, there's some kind of joy in there. There's some kind of happiness. There's some kind of, you're getting some kind of sense gratification. And so I was thinking the ultimate counter is we really have to be consciousness if it's our service. Is my service to explain this situation away? Because I've noticed in management, sometimes you do have to, you have to say, this isn't so favorable for this condition because of this, this, and this. And so therefore I'm suggesting this. By the way, this person has so many good qualities or so much appreciation for this, but this is an issue that tends to happen. So there's no joy in there. There's no desire to I'm up and you're down, or there's just, I have to do this because I have to serve. That's one thing that I've kind of noticed, and Srila Prabhupada said we have to be conscious before we get Krishna conscious. So if we're conscious, why am I going to do this? Why am I speaking? Is it my service? If it's not my service, then maybe I just just like you said, we've been talking about getting out of the situation.
Yeah.
So this is one thought I had on
That's really, really, really nice. Thank you. Is this favorable or unfavorable? I'm interested.
I really agree with that point. I was going to make a similar point in that, I like to continue with what you were saying. Like, it should actually be painful for us to have to say those things. Like, it should be so like painful that I don't want to say it actually, but it needs to be said, and that's how we know. If there's any part of us that's like, maybe it doesn't need to be said, but we really, and so it comes down to also Drishta's point. Like, it really boils down to what's your mood in saying it, if you're getting some kind of kick or ego trip out of it at all. And we really have to look closely at that, because we can convince ourselves that we're not. I mean, I know myself, I can convince myself that it's not about my false ego, but I'm lying to myself. It just happens. So we have to be very delicate.
That's great. Yes, and then Drishta. I know. We started late though, Prabhu. I know.
It's not really a question, just to build upon the point. The rules, like the discipline we see that Krishna kind of shows in the Bhagavatam, like, the heavy, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, like you're gonna die, or you should kill yourself, or whatever. All these rules, it's really, if you think about it, it's really the external discipline for you to understand that how can I build the internal aspect, or where, like you said, at one point I don't even feel, I internally don't feel like doing it, because Krishna's not a cruel person who's like, oh, you accidentally said this, oh my God, you're such a bad person, and oh, you're gonna go to hell, and that's not the Krishna that we know. That's not the one we love. Krishna is someone who judges you on your intention. And so internally, by the external discipline, he's telling you that this is a really serious thing that you're doing. And so you should understand, just like in school, like we don't discipline the kids, so they're just like, oh my God, my teacher's so bad, she just tells me this. More like, oh, she's trying to teach me a lesson. Like, this is such a deep and serious thing that's why there's such a big consequence. So therefore I should work on my internal self and my heart and my soul and my consciousness in a way where I can develop a level of consciousness where I don't even commit to these things. It's not my nature, my natural person is not to do these things.
Right, yes. Yeah, because criticism is a habit. That's why, it starts in the mind. We're always thinking these things, then we start saying it.
I just had like a small story. I was in India. I was in Vrindavan, and I made like this little vrata that, like, if anyone catches me criticizing someone, I'll give them 200 rupees. And Nandavraj was there. And so then I did it, and I was talking about this one devotee next to my, like a senior devotee of mine, my friend, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to say any names, and I was just like, yeah, like sometimes, and anyways, he was like 200 rupees. I'm like, what did I do? Like, I didn't even say his name. I didn't and he said, I could sense that like you were getting kind of too into it. Like maybe you were not saying any names. Maybe you were like trying to like stay out of it, but you were enjoying it a little bit. And it was just like so subtle and so like that I didn't even realize it. And so of course I paid up, but it was like very like eye-opening for me.
You just made me remember something.
Paid you up. Paid me like 800 rupees.
Before we close out, you made me remember something I hadn't thought about in years and years and years. Many years ago in New York City, there was a Maharaj, and he had taken a vrata. He was giving a class that he would not criticize anyone. I think it was like for 30 days. And he said what he did is he had one of those rubber bracelets. Remember like those Live Strong or whatever. I don't remember what it said. It didn't say Live Strong on it. But just like a plain rubber bracelet, because he was a sannyasi. And every time that he criticized, he would move it from one wrist to the other. So that action helped him notice how often he was criticizing or complaining about somebody. And it said it helped him change that habit. Maybe we could all do that. Thank you very much. College Sanji band. Start moving it from one, yeah. I think it was after you moved it. So then after you moved it, then you had to extend your vow by like another day, because you made it through only like 2 days or whatever. Okay. So thank you all so much for tolerating me, for listening. Please forgive me of any offenses. I'm still learning. You all are teaching me. Vanchakalpa tarubhasya kripa sindhu bhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.